people are so much stronger and more resilient than they give themselves credit for when they're in the crisis of it.
Was there ever a particular case that you think about that broke your heart?
You're going to try to make me cry again, Steven. This feels unfair.
No, it's interesting because our conversation last time was so interesting because we spoke so matter of fact about the subject of love and marriage.
Yeah.
And then for me to also learn at the same time that you are a deeply emotional person.
Yeah.
What is the one case?
I've had a few. I mean, one of them I wrote about in my book, which was it was a case that I won that I should have lost. I represented a pimp. That's what he did for a living. And he owned a variety of illegal businesses. He's in prison for a long, long time now. But at the time, he had very brutally abused a woman who he had children with. And we went to, there was a family court proceeding. And the lawyer on the other side of the case, the lawyer who represented his co-parent, his victim, if you will, was very inexperienced. She was an assigned lawyer. So I was privately paid, as I am, and she was assigned by the state. So she was getting, I think at the time, $25 an hour, something like that, versus my $750 an hour. And she was quite new as a lawyer. She was right out of school. She wasn't quite sure, of what to do and how to do it. And I was fairly experienced. And a judge who was very impatient, who just was in a bad mood that day. I don't know what he had for breakfast or what it was, but he was an older judge. He'd been on the bench for probably too long. He retired a few years later. The key piece of evidence they had was a photograph of the way that of this woman's face after my client had allegedly beat her up quite badly. And getting a photograph into evidence is very easy, but it requires a very specific phrasing. So what you say is, I'd like this to be marked for identification. You mark the photo, and then you hand it to the witness, or you hand it to the court officer who hands it to the witness, and you say, I'm showing you what's been marked as petitioner's 1 for identification. Do you recognize that? Yes. What do you recognize it to be? It's a photograph. Does that photograph fairly and accurately depict your face after he beat you up? Or does it accurately reflect your face on the date you've been discussing? Yes. Your Honor, I'd like it put into evidence. That's it. It's easy. Does it fairly and accurately depict? For whatever reason, most likely lack of experience, opposing counsel, I guess, didn't know how to get a photograph into evidence. Now, normally in that situation, a judge will be helpful. Like they will just jump in and say, ma'am, does this fairly? But this judge was just not in the mood. And opposing counsel said, I'd like this to be marked. And then she said, could you hand it to the witness? And she said, what is that a photo of? So I did my job. I said, objection. She's asking about the contents of a document, not an evidence, which is my job. Judge said, sustained. Which means my objection is correct. So she said, okay, I'm sorry. Who took this photo? And she said, I don't know who took it. She says, okay, well, what is it a photo of? Stood up again, objection. Asking about the contents of a document, not an evidence. And I could see opposing counsel getting flustered because she didn't know the words. And my internal dialogue at that moment was, just say it. Like, just get it right. Like, just say fair. Does it fairly and accurately depict? Just say it. Like, and I remember looking at the judge and thinking, like, you're letting this happen. You're letting this happen. Don't let this happen. Like, she's poor. She's poor. That's why she's going to lose. She's going to lose because she's poor. And she can't afford a lawyer. And he's going to win because he can afford a lawyer that knows how to put a document into evidence. And there's something really wrong about that. And the judge didn't. The judge just let her drown. And she asked 3 or 4 more questions that were the wrong questions. And then she just said, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. And then she just sat down. And the case got dismissed. And we walked out. And as we walked out, my client patted me on the back and he said, you know, a good lawyer is better than 20 stick-up men. And I remember thinking, this is not a good day. It's not a good day. And that case, that was a long time ago, and it's still stayed with me because it was, I did my job, and I you know, I represent my client, but I also represent the system. And I don't always believe in my client, but I have to believe in the system. And I have to believe that it's not my right to judge people's case. It's the judge's right. Like I believe in this system. I believe in the adversarial system. But watching someone lose who shouldn't lose